Board games, board games, that's what we're talking about. Board games, board games, I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this morning with a little bit of singing. And over here we have Alan Paul, who has already been introduced to you all. But don't worry, we will do that thing again where Alan says what they do and where they've been. Board games, we're not gonna shout. Board games, that's what we're talking about. Alan is part of Surprise Tear, and that's a company that you can't find over there, or over there, or over there, because it doesn't really have a physical location. Board games, I'm not going to shout. Board games, that's what we're talking about. Hey!
Hooray! Completely unscripted. Hi, Bez. Good morning, and I hope you're having a great breakfast.
Thank you. So I've already managed to get out. I'm really proud. I just, true story behind the scenes. I got up. I wanted to sleep a little bit longer, maybe lie in my bed, go onto the internet, which is the easy thing to do. But instead, I pushed myself out. I put on some clothes. I did my shaving early, and then I went out for a run. And, well, a kind of intermittent run / jog / walk. And then went out, came back, and now for breakfast, which I don't normally eat before this show, but I had because, did a good bit of workouts. I had a bit of cheese, I had, a rice cake, and now I'm having some vitamins and water. And that is my morning. So I'm really proud of myself, and I hope everyone else is having a good breakfast. But of course, I am Bez, this is breakfast time, and we are blethering about board games. And Alan, in as much or as little as you would like to say, bearing in mind we'll have some quick questions later, but who are you?
Who the hell am I? I'm a game designer. I'm part of Surprise Tear Games.
Morning, Alan.
I'm an older gamer, as you can probably see. I used to have ginger hair, but not so much now. And I've been designing games since I was 11. So that's over. Oh crumbs. That's over 50 years. Oh crikey. Anyway, well, and I've got some examples of stuff I've designed behind me. I'm trying to do this thing where you have to mirror your appearance on the screen. These are a couple of my games over here, and then over here there's one of mine. That one, unfortunately, there called Path of Glory is not one of mine. It just happens to be lying around. So I've designed a few games, and I work with Tony Boydell, and also with Charlie, my wife, and Karen Boydell, and together we are Surprise Tear Games. And we have been around for 20 years. I'm wearing the 20 years Surprise Tear t-shirt. Oh, you can't see that. 20 years of Surprise Tears. That's enough of that. Yeah. So we've been going for that long as a company, and we've got a reasonably large number of games in our back catalogue, some of which you can see here. Some of them those are old ones which I've designed. Yeah.
Your personal designs, but I will bring up Surprise Tear in a moment, which we can talk about. And if people want to check you out, then it's surprisetear.co. All those links down at the bottom, which we'll leave up. And if you are watching, then please let us know. Feel free. Any respectful comments are always welcome. and it's always lovely to have Alan Oughton with us. Good to see you.
Morning, Alan.
Feel free to like, and follow. And been really happy. Thank you, everyone who's been just following along. And today we are going to be talking about a little bit about how games have evolved, which I thought that it would be great to have someone who, at least within the field of UK and Essen, I mean, it is very much a UK-centric mindset that you've got. Obviously, the story is going to be different today compared to what it would be like when I talk to KC from Nigeria or someone from Japan, for example, I'm sure. But first of all, we've got to talk about brilliant things, brilliant things. Here's a little thing that is brilliant. I want to talk about shoes. Shoes are really brilliant. I mean, I don't think I've talked about shoes, but, you know, just think about it. The fact that I was able to go running and my feet weren't slamming. I wasn't worried about glass piercing. I wasn't worried about, you know, something infecting me through my feet. Shoes, they protect us. They cushion us. They allow us to do things in a better way, basically just through protection. Shoes.
On the other hand, my wife would say shoes are a bit of a distraction, really, because she always has bare feet. She much prefers bare feet, especially around the house, because it's cooler, you know. So she doesn't. It's more comfortable, she finds. So you know, that's just a devil's advocate position, really. Personally, I tend to wear shoes. I'm wearing slippers now. It's June. Is it June still? Just, it's June.
I mean, it depends where you are.
I'm wearing socks and slippers because I like to have warm feet. But yeah, I like shoes.
I mean, I know Charlie, and I can report that Charlie does generally wear shoes. I mean, maybe not in their own house, maybe not whilst wandering around the garden, but certainly there are certain areas, or indeed where you're driving. And morning, Will Cook, it's lovely to see you. And Will Cook prefers very cold feet, apparently.
Oh, okay, all right. Oh, I don't like that, because I tend to get cramps in my feet, which is a bit weird, I suppose, but yeah, I need to have nice warm feet. Well, I tend to wear socks. I'm one of those heathens who will actually occasionally wear socks and sandals. I'm that uncool. So I like to have warm feet.
So
it's all right. I do get ridiculed by my daughters for that. So
now moving on to, and we daily highlights, listening to music and seeing the sights. Daily highlights. I probably should change that because it's not generally about listening to music. Although I did listen to some good music yesterday. Listened to a good bit of Lou Reed and Tao and Get Down, Stay Down, who I quite enjoy. A bit of Primal Scream, Screamadelica, brilliant album. I don't know if you're familiar with this one, Alan.
Not really. No, I'm not familiar with that. No. But I tend to get most of my advice on music from my daughters nowadays.
Okay.
But I tend to listen to older stuff. I'm a great fan of Captain Beefheart, see?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so much to the disgust of Charlie, doesn't like Captain Beefheart stuff. But I do. I'm willing to try out Master Replica.
How do you feel about Lieutenant Pigeon?
Lieutenant Pigeon? I'm kind of okay. But what I've been listening to, well, actually, no.
Captain Beefheart and Lieutenant Pigeon both have this raucous energy and just this joyous energy. And I think if someone's feeling a bit down, if you've got some sort of, I think, Mouldy Old Dough by Lieutenant Pigeon, and that whole album, just go and listen to it, and hopefully by the end, you might be smiling a little bit more than you otherwise would. You might have a little bit more energy.
As you were praising shoes, I was thinking shirts. Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. Do you remember that one? That was a it's Bonzo Doodah Band. If you don't know them, look them up. They have some weird, crazy, really fun songs, and one of them is in praise of shirts. And they have an interviewer goes out into the streets and starts asking random people what they think about shirts. And there are some weird conversations in there, but it's really quite a nice little sketch. Yeah, bonzos are a very British type of humour back in the
So
mist.
maybe you could type that up in the private chat, because that's how do you spell that, and then I can share that with everyone. So other daily highlights for me. Oh, I did actually draw a lot of cats that I was quite chuffed with. I'm going to show off some of these cats that I drew in case people haven't seen them. I was asked to draw cats in the colours of either the pride flag or maybe the non-binary flag. It was a special request.
Oh, right.
And so I'm not too happy with the first two that I did, but then I'm quite happy with the others with various degrees. But yeah, it feels like something that kind of worked fairly nicely as a concept. And that was my daily highlight. Have you got, and there we've got the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band.
Doodah Band, yeah. Well, I mean, do I have a daily highlight? My daily highlight is really what I'm working on mostly at the moment is Kingmaker. So it's kind of Kingmaker play testing that I'm into at the moment, and it's currently on Tabletopia, and I'm quite pleased with how that's going now, because we had some really good play tests over the weekend at Virtual GridCon. So it's not kind of today or yesterday, but it's certainly something I'm looking at now, heavily involved in now, and I'm quite pleased with how that's going. I haven't got any. I'm just loading up actually the Tabletopia screen. I don't know if you can actually. I wonder if you can. Can you see it if I paste it? Can you see it if I?
There should be a little button for you to share your screen.
Oh yeah, I can do that. All right.
In the audience, Alan Outson says that their highlight was to cut back a large forest of ivy from a roof. It was high at least, and now there's more light.
That's good. That is excellent. I'll just share this briefly. See if this will work. Right, let's see.
While you're doing that, I'll talk about.
Oh, it says Chrome has a bug that can cause screen sharing to crash on Windows 10. Oh dear.
Ooh.
Well, maybe I better not do that then. We don't want this to crash.
Okay, well, let's move to games. What have we been playing? What are their names? Games.
Yay.
I played at least 2 games yesterday, that depending on how you count. So I was with Chris and McCall, who are parts of our bubble, and I am keeping distance, but we kind of know the traffic of everyone. Anyway, so together we played 2 games. Firstly was 22-1B Baker Street by Gibson's Games.
Oh, yes.
Do you know this one?
Yes, excellent game. Yes.
Are you sure?
Am I sure?
So I will let me bring up the game that I'm talking about.
Just so there are a few Sherlock Holmes games, so maybe.
I'm not talking about Consulting Detective.
No.
This is one of the pictures.
Oh no, maybe I don't know that one.
So basically, you've got this is a case, and then it gives you bits of info. You wander around the board, and on each location, it will give you a clue that you write up, and hopefully by the time you've visited half of the locations, you might have uncovered the solution.
Right. Yeah, I know I don't know 22-1B Baker. I probably should do. I know Consulting Detective, and there's a Sherlock Holmes card game, which is also excellent. But I don't know.
This one is, and you can see some of. So on the back of a card, it will tell you exactly where you go. Now this game, it's obviously isn't a review, but it's from 1975, and I think it's somewhat a relic of its time. The version that I have is gorgeous to look at, the clues aren't really thematic. The clues aren't things that say, oh, this person was away at this point, or oh,
Right.
so for example, in one early case, so I'm just going to give you spoilers for case number 3. So if you don't want to listen to this, I'm going to flash up a little thing that says spoilers, and you can mute this until the spoiler tag has gone away. That's what I'm doing. So now everyone can mute this until the spoiler tag goes away. So one of the clues is little blank least. And so you think, okay, that's less. And it says this is the secret's identity clue 1 of 2. And then secret's identity clue 2 of 2 is what is the types of winds that are constantly blowing from, I can't remember the exact wording, from this direction to the other direction. And the answer is meant to be trade. So if you put those 2 words together, it's less trade.
Trade.
Lestrade.
Right.
So then it's Inspector Lestrade is actually the chameleon.
Right. Yes.
And so
so it's more of a puzzle type of thing for the clues. Yeah.
They're more word puzzles, they're more linguistic puzzles, and it can feel a little bit unsatisfying because as you go around, lots of the locations say no clue, and sometimes you can spend 3 locations trying to get one thing, someone else goes to one location, gets the thing, and you don't actually need to have any induction or any of that. And it feels like it's a really fine game for the target audience, which is like, okay, if you're 10-year-olds, then probably a bunch of 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds could play this together and have a good time. And it's perfectly reasonable. And the roll and move, okay, maybe it gives other people time to do something, but roll and move, some people find it frustrating. Anyway, that's one of the few games we didn't play twice.
So
normally,
that's a game of its time then, really.
Yeah, very much.
Well, that does happen. Yeah, I mean, I'm working on Kingmaker, which is very much a game of its time, and nowadays. What I'm doing with Kingmaker, just looking at that one, is not making a totally new version, which is a modern game called Kingmaker. I'm retaining the classic Kingmaker, so it's got the kind of 1970s, late 70s, early 80s kind of feel to it, because that's how that game was originally, and I want to retain that look and feel, that flavor. It's quite probable, something like you were saying with the roll and move 2-2 back, so it might not have got published now. And I think we were, which is this game here, where I can't get my finger, this game here called Starship Tycoons, this one, that's one of my first games. Note the only 2-color printing on it. That was very much like that. It was a roll and move style pick up and deliver game, and I wouldn't publish that now. That was done back in the 80s, and it's there you go, look at that. It has got some subtleties. Well, there's 2 things which would now be wrong with it. One is it's only 2-color. The cards are only single color for ease and cheapness of manufacture. And it is quite a simple, relatively straightforward pick up and deliver game. It had the wrinkle it has is that when you deliver stuff, depending on when you deliver it, you get money for it in a certain currency, and the currencies have a relation to each other, which can change during the game. So what you're trying to do is not just pick up and deliver stuff for a profit. You then want to make sure you've got the most valuable currencies in, and you win by getting 1 million currencies, whatever the currency is. You're trying to buy the moon, which is a kind of weird thing to do, but there you go.
So that is the win objective in that game.
The win objective is buying the moon, because that's what people wanted to do back then, obviously. And if you're a mega corporation, you want to buy the moon because it's real estate, that was a game definitely of its time. I still think it's quite a nice fun little game, but nowadays it probably wouldn't stand out. It would need to be completely revamped in terms of graphic design, and a lot of the rules would have to change to make it a more modern theme.
And yeah, I think that obviously there's the approach that Restoration Games has made, which is to do what you say explicitly or not doing, which is to essentially make quite a different game. It's more of a follow-up. I mean, Fireball Island 2000 and whatever year it was redone is quite different to the original Fireball Island. And same with Stop Thief and all the other games that they've managed to do. I mean, Return to Dark Castle, is that the name of their new one, which has big modern technology and it's crazy, but it revitalizes the spirit and is more of a spiritual revamp, a remastering, a follow-up.
Yes, I think that's the way to go. I think. I mean, there is a place for resurrecting old classics. I mean, a Canadian publisher approached me a while ago, about 10 years ago, I think it was, to see if they could redo the Cry Havoc series, which Siege over here is one of. The difficulty with revamping those is the amount of time and effort it would take. The trouble is, those games are from the 80s and none of the files exist. So in order to recreate the games, there would have to have been, redoing of a lot of the text and artwork for it. So to me, it felt like a huge amount of work for something which it's history. It's not a game that I would necessarily want to see republished. Sorry, slightly wrong. I wouldn't want to spend a lot of time on getting it ready for republish. If somebody else wanted to do it, I'd be quite happy with that. I'd rather focus on new things.
I think the interesting thing about old games is that, unlike an old film where you need to have some awareness of what's going on, but it doesn't take as much energy and focus to watch an old film or listen to an old song as it does play an old game. And games have evolved. And I noticed, Starship Tycoons, it's so old. That's on Board Game Geek. I don't know if you noticed what I'm highlighting here.
Oh, it hasn't got duration on it or weight or anything. Yeah.
So, but it's something that I would be curious about, partially because I know you and I'm curious about you and your history of game development as a person, because we are friends, but also because I am someone who's super into games. I am interested in the history of games. So there's a little bit of that for sure. But most people, if you are playing games for pleasure, I think that it's almost undeniable, the way things have evolved, that you will get more pleasure from playing more modern games.
Yes, I think that's right. Their design has come on leaps and bounds over even just over the 50 years I've been doing it. We've moved on from roll and move and relatively simple things. I think when I was young, the kind of games that were published were aimed at a kind of lowest common denominator Christmas family market. So there was certainly in the UK, there was a definite feeling from publishers that they could never sell something which was complicated because people wouldn't be able to readily understand it. If you had rules which are more than a page or so long, people wouldn't read them and they wouldn't be able to understand the games. That was certainly a feeling that I'm sure that a lot of publishers had. Certainly there was that mainstream view that games were for children, games are a Christmas phenomenon. It's not a serious thing, not a serious pastime for adults, and that has been completely revolutionized. Interesting. If you go back earlier than I'm talking about the kind of 60s, early 70s time. If you go back much earlier than that, go to 50s and pre-war even, you actually find some really quite interesting games produced then, which in a lot of ways are more inventive. I know if you look at there's a place, if you look at somewhere called the History of Wargaming Project by John Curry, he has got a whole series of stuff on old style wargaming, and some of the old games are quite radical, and they would stand up. Some of them would stand up quite readily now. So it's interesting that I think it's interesting that it's probably the impact of modern marketing from post-war onwards. Initially led to a kind of explosion in products, but relatively simple products, like you've got Monopoly and Cluedo and things like that, and children's games like Cop It. Right, I had Cop It and Campaign, Waddington's Campaign. Those relatively simple, straightforward things, which were easy to market and easy to sell. And it's only really from the late 80s, and then in this country probably later than that, probably 90s onwards, that you get a more sophisticated board game market developing, and then we get Eurogames exploding.
So really good points about the relationship that the ability to mass produce something has on, and the socio-economic environment has on, the artifacts. Putting a pin in that, and Aqua Sulis also says that it's interesting to think about how games come back into fashion. For example, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, which now has a new edition coming out from Dave Neal. Who I think you also know Dave Neal?
I don't know Dave Neal, no.
Dave Neal, lovely person from Cambridge, playtest group, and came to London a couple of times. I got a chance.
Oh, wait a minute, what am I talking about? Of course,
a couple of
course I do know Dave Neal.
Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detectives, and there have been a whole bunch of new things, and it's almost like, okay, taking that old thing but updating them, as we said, for restoration games. Getting back, because to games that we've been playing, the other game that I'll quickly mention is Schmuggler. Meet Intelligente Connector, which means with intelligent putty. And do you know this game?
I don't know that game, no.
So this is a game by Klaus Teuber, better known for not their first game, Catan. Well, that's what they're best known for, and also their first game, Barbarossa, now known as Doddles, is really good. Schmuggler is a decent game. You hide things in little balls, and you're trying to get your balls to be big enough, as big as possible, while still fitting through a little hole. That's and then once you fit through the game, the bigger your ball is, if you see this, literally the bigger your ball is, you'll get to guess what's inside someone else's ball. If you guess it correctly, then you steal the things that they were trying to get through, essentially. That is the entire game. Trying to get your ball to be one of the biggest balls that fits through the hole, in order to get the chance to try and steal things from other people.
Can I briefly go back to Dave Neal?
Sure.
Because I do know Dave Neal. Of course I know Dave Neal. And I've got one of his prototypes. And I wanted to mention this. I wanted to mention it for a while, actually. This is a prototype of a game that he is developing for ages 2. Oh, no, I can't get it. For ages 2 to 5, called Whistle and Fudge. Okay, and it's a very interesting little concept. And when he first said, I remember because it was at a Cambridge playtest meeting, when he first said, I'm developing a game for age group 2 to 5, I thought, two-year-olds? That's going to be a bit of a challenge. But it's a really interesting concept. It's a story game. So you've got, you have these nice, wonderful little cards. This story is story 1, which is called Where's He Is. You're trying to find this mouse. And the basic idea of this game for this age group is that they can look at pictures and make choices between pictures, usually of animals, and where to look for the mouse. So are you going to look for the mouse in the long grass, or are you going to look for the mouse down the wishing well? And each location has another clue. So it's a very simple little story that you build. And the idea is that with 2 and 3-year-olds, you are, well, obviously not doing it on their own, you are supervising them through that simple storytelling idea. So they're basically learning literally just how to sequence a story in a fun way through a game, and they're making, the idea is that they are making the decisions. Yeah, they can be, you know, hints from the adults, of course, but they are making decisions about where the story goes. And then for 5-year-olds, you can introduce. He's got these little stars that you can earn when you do something successful in the game. You can get a sticker.
So you're playing this with your grandchild?
Play this with Beth and Oscar, yeah, which was really, it's a really fascinating thing. And of course, it has to be short enough that you can hold their attention for that amount of time, which works fine. And then if you have multiple stories, you've got replayability. Although you can easily play this several times, one story with a 3-year-old,
and that's something that
really well. It's very, very nice.
We just have a better understanding of behavior psychology now and development. And I think that this sort of thing isn't something that would have been imagined 100 years ago.
Yes, I think that's
certainly
right. And the good thing about this is teaching. Well, it's not an educational game. It's not designed as an educational game. It's designed as a game for 2 to 5-year-olds. So it will, per force and automatically, have a lot of developmental value. It's teaching socialization of the children. It's teaching some sequencing of stories. It's teaching pattern matching. It's really just a lovely idea of how to do an activity with your children. I mean, actually, to be fair, in lockdown, from Dave Neal, in lockdown, you could do it. You could probably do it over Zoom if you can hold a 3-year-old on Zoom. That's right. I found that quite difficult. I mean, we've done some family gatherings on Zoom, and it's just about possible for a 5-year-old. My grandchildren are 6 and 3. It's just about possible to hold a 5 or 6-year-old on Zoom for a few minutes before they run away. With a 3-year-old, it's almost impossible. You could sit a 3-year-old down and play that game, but actually doing it remotely is pretty much impossible, I think, with a 3-year-old. So hopefully, when we get back together again, they will have forgotten the story and I can run it again for them. Maybe Dave will have done some more stories.
So getting back to games that we've been playing, if we go quickly, I know that you've been to Virtual GridCon.
Yeah. Virtual GridCon was Paul Grogan's replacement for his GridCon game convention, which he was going to run last week. Was it last weekend or was it earlier?
It was last weekend.
Last weekend. I know it was on last weekend, but well, GridCon 2 was going to run, I think, earlier in the year. And he replaced it with this virtual GridCon last weekend, and it was a really fun event. Had quite a lot of people attending, loads and loads of people attending. One of the interesting and fantastic things that he did was a charity raffle for the Chrysalis Youth Empowerment Network, which is a charity that supports children in Uganda. They label it Game Changers Uganda. So it's actually recruiting children in schools from Uganda to play games, learn stuff, and there are various methods you can support these people in Uganda, and the charity raffle had that as their main charity, and it was excellently supported by large amounts of cash, which is great. So if you have a chance to look at Charities Empowerment Network, please do. And there is I think the Virtual GridCon fundraising page is still available on Just Giving there. It's a very worthwhile cause. We've actually been supporting it through Supply Stare for some while. And there are, if you're on Facebook, look at the Virtual GridCon Facebook page, you can see some videos of the children in Uganda playing games and see what they do, which is great.
I have shared those things on the different mediums. So, but
Brilliant,
apart from Kingmaker, what else were you playing? Right.
Well, my main focus for Virtual GridCon was Kingmaker playtest, and we've got a new game called Snails and Grails, which is being designed by myself, Dave Mortimer, and Rob Harper, which we also playtested. That was really successful. But I also played Dave Turtsy's Defense of Procyon 3, which I think I've mentioned it before, which was a 4-player asymmetric science fiction game, and that was great. That was great fun. Really thoroughly enjoyed that. And also played Quartermaster General, so a proper published game with my friend Hammy and 4 others, so 6 player. And we played that. We had an interesting mechanism, because when you're doing virtual gaming, mostly it's kind of Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator, Board Game Arena, or Yakuza, things like that. For Quartermaster General, we decided that we'd go very old school, because we all had a set. We all had the cards for our particular nation for the game. It's a World War II card game. We all had the cards for our nation physically, so we were able to shuffle up our own deck, play with physical components locally, and then share online the map. And Hammy got a way of showing the map on the screen through Google Slides, I think, and then he could update the map so we could all see the status, and we could actually play in a much more conventional kind of way with just the map showing between us.
So that worked really well. More akin to play by email or play by mail rather than.
Yeah, that worked.
And really we've got hello, Kevin. It's lovely to have you with us. And they ask how you created it on Tabletop Simulator. Well, I know you use Tabletopia, rather than Tabletop Simulator. But basically, Kevin's asking how easy or difficult you found it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I started by sticking some stuff on both Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia to see which was easier to create on. I actually went through the Tabletopia route. I found the process of doing that slightly easier. The Kingmaker is quite a big game, so it was quite a challenge to do. It's actually it's fairly straightforward, even though it takes quite a long time to do it. What you have to do first of all is create all the files for the artwork, for the components you want to put on there. I mean, there are standard components like cubes and meeples and stuff like that on there, so you can have some standardized pieces, which we have used in some of our prototypes. Like with Snails and Grails, we have standard cubes. It's easy to create them anew. But the other materials, like cards, you have to create card decks, really. If you've got a card deck which has got a common back, you can just load the card back, and then once you've created all the fronts of the cards, you can load all of those card fronts, an individual file for each card front, and load them all as a package. So that's quite straightforward. However, if you've got a game which has got cards which are individual fronts and backs. You have to load each card as a separate file. So it does take a while to do. It's fairly reliable, but just takes a long time. And Kingmaker has got over 200 cards, and it's got over 200 other components. The little noble shields which we have in the main game have to be put on individually. So you have to create separate pieces of artwork for each component, and then make components. Tabletopia has got a good range of components though, so you can have cards are a standard item, and you can create lots of different types of cards, your own bespoke cards front and back, and you can then manipulate them within the game like a published game. So you can have flipping the cards, you can have shuffling decks, all that kind of stuff easily.
So how many hours would you say approximately, just to close this?
To put Kingmaker on, it's probably taken me, create all the stuff. One version's probably taken about 4 or 5 days of work to put it on there. But that's a big game. I mean, for example, that's a big board. We have to scan the board in and create a board which we can then load up to Tabletopia that will look good. So it's not for that type of game, that size of game. That was the only I did it because that's the only way I could do it. If I didn't have to do virtual playtesting, I probably wouldn't do that. For contrast, I mean, I put a quick version of the Ming Voyages on there, our new 2-player pocket campaigns game, and that didn't take very long at all. That took less than a day to put that up, because it's got much fewer cards to stick it on. So the good thing about Tabletopia is you can understand the process and how to do it very easily. Just look at the
even a couple of days of full-time work is, a lot more than most people have. And at Quasulis, I find uploading cards into Tabletop Simulator a bit easier. You just have to upload all the card faces backs into a single image on a grid.
Yes.
But let's move on, and I will ask you some quick questionable questions. So, Alan Paul, did you have breakfast?
I did.
What did you eat?
I had granola today.
Have you been out today?
No, not yet. I wasn't as good as you. Didn't that for
when was the last time you went out?
Yesterday. Went out yesterday for a walk. Yes. Well, we've been sitting inside all day for 3 days with virtual GridCon, so we hadn't been going out for our usual daily exercise. So yesterday we went out for a walk around the village. That was good.
War. What is it good for?
Absolutely nothing. Say it again.
So here's some quick yes or no questions. Do you like dancing?
I like other people dancing, but not me really. I used to do line dancing with Charlie, but I am terrible at remembering dances. Dance steps. I am just not very good at it. Really. Charlie really loved dancing, but she hasn't managed to get me back.
You drawing?
Drawing? No, I don't do drawing.
Singing?
Singing I can do. Yeah, sing in the shower occasionally.
Reading?
I do a lot of reading. Yes. At the moment, I'm tending to read mostly World War II non-fiction stuff because I'm researching various games.
Other than sleeping, what do you think would be your top 4 things that you do by time spent?
Ooh. Well, at the moment, game design development. I'm learning German on Duolingo. That takes quite a lot of time, and don't try to talk German at me at the moment because I'm at early stages yet. But that's good. So I'd recommend that if you want to learn a language. Duolingo is really good fun. What else? Reading is another thing I do a lot of. Yeah, particularly I'm in lockdown. I've gone more to Audible because it's kind of much easier, and perhaps it's more resting on the eyes actually. I think maybe spending a lot of time on the computer, so I tend to do audible stuff.
And talking about your games,
yes,
what name a game you made that was delayed?
That was delayed.
If you can't think of one, you can just say pass.
A game of mine that was delayed. Confucius. That was horribly delayed, and there's a very long story about that. Most of it not a good story, so I probably don't want to go there and inflict that on everybody. But no, yes, that was supposed to be a it is a medium heavy Euro, and it was supposed to be the game that would that Surprise Day Games would take off and become a big company. And we had a partner in production who really, really badly let us down. And that was a bad experience, so I don't really want to go there today.
Okay. You can just give the name of the game or say pass. So what was a game of yours that you feel was pretty?
Was pretty? Tara Seated Kings, which is, you can only, I have to get my finger in the right place. There, up there, there it is. There, yeah. Tara Seated Kings, that is a very beautiful game. Now, should I get it? And you can see it close up. Or you can do
we can talk about it another day, because
talk about it another day.
What was a game that was financially successful?
Financially, one of my games, this one here, there, Siege, that was financially successful. That was my late 1980s part of the Cry Havoc series. I got quite a lot of royalties out of that one.
And finally, what is a game you feel was artistically successful?
Oh, good question. Artistically successful. Well, one of my, not one that I've designed, one I've published, would be On the Cards. I think that is artistically successful, because it's that, like we talked about it before, that analysis of trick-taking card games from Sebastian Bleasdale. That's a lovely piece of work. I mean, artistically, in the sense of game design, yeah, that was really good. I like that.
Thank you very much. And now I've pasted some links that people can follow, although I'm going to check them out as we're talking. So we were going to talk a little bit about how games have evolved, and you gave me these links. Yeah. And can you explain why? And let's talk about how games have changed since you started playing games.
Yeah.
What was actually the first game you can remember playing? Let's set the seed for what's Alan Paul as a young Wayne.
Well, probably Formula One. The old, I think it was the Waddington's game or Parker Brothers game. Formula One. It'll be on BGG. That's obviously it's a car racing game. The thing I liked about that game was that it had a deck of cards which enabled you, gave you certain advantages. So there was a superb driving card. So if you're going into a corner too fast, you could play superb driving and still get around the corner. Because that game was a game where you decide on the speed your car's going on around the track. And there we go. You can decide there's a speed dial, and you can set that. And then to go into corners, you had to brake, which means it costs you your brake ratings or your tire ratings would go down as you went into the corners. And so the cards kind of ameliorated these restrictions that you would have. And I thought that's a really good mechanism. You can actually, through relatively random card draws, you could correct some of the things that are going to go wrong for you in the game. And I really did like that, the mechanism of the standard cornering, where your judgment there is what distance before the corner do I have to brake in order to go around the corner properly. And if I've got a superb driving or one of those other cards, I can stress out the car a bit more. So that was one of my earliest things. I think one of the earliest games that I feel influenced my game design was Totopoly. That's another one of the early titles. Horse racing game. The thing that I found really interesting about that game, why I think that's a kind of a game that influenced me a lot, was that it was a two-part game. So the first part of Totopoly is you go around a track, the bottom track there. The bottom track there is where you by roll a move, you go around the track, and that's not the race. It's before the race where you gain your horse, you pick up your horses, your horses have to go to the vets to see how they're getting on, and you can gain various advantages through that first part. And then once you've been around the track, once you've been around that track at the bottom there, you then progress to the actual race itself, and you can bet on the race. And the interesting thing about Totopoly is you don't win by winning the race. You win by having the most money at the end. So it's who you bet on that counts, not whether your horse wins. So it's actually for its time, I think it's got quite a lot of innovation. Although it's got roll and move in the first part, it's got some quite interesting game mechanics that make it have quite a lot of substance, really, I felt. And I just love the fact that it's
the Formula One game has been almost replaced in the public consciousness by Formula Day.
Yes.
Would you say that both these games, however, are games that are still relevant today in that they are not clearly superseded or irrelevant, if you know what I mean?
I think that I think Formula Day is more inventive in that it uses those multiple types of dice for the gearing up. That's a good way of using the dice components. Whereas Formula One is very much, when Formula One came out, dice were basically six-sided. That's what you've got. You haven't got multi-sided, other types of multi-sided dice. You just haven't got them. Even the card mechanic is a fairly obvious idea. Having a deck of cards which you can use to play to help is a fairly obvious one. I think that where we've got an evolution in game design is very much whole new types of games like worker placement and whole resource management types of games and tile laying games. All of these, what are now standard styles of games, were took quite a long while to evolve, but have revolutionized how you can approach a particular game design problem. And I think there's much more realization that the general public will be able to cope with some of these new mechanisms quite readily. Whereas I think in the days of Formula One and Monopoly and Cluedo stuff, there's some basic standard tropes of game design which will seem things that you can do, and you can't stress out the brains of the public by having new concepts. Whereas now, I think that it's clear you can, and you do. So
yeah, I think the notion of worker placements, for example, or entirely new styles of games, I know that lots of people actually attribute, I think it's Richard Breese's Dragon. Whereas lots of people also say that Kalis was the first kind of modern worker placements game, but I mean, it's continued to evolve, and we have seen clearly more simplified, more streamlined versions of all these mechanisms. And Roll and Move has moved away, pun not intended. But do you think that its role in pun intended is totally gone? And
I think so. Yeah, I think roll and move, the standard type of roll and move has gone. I think you can have. I think there's still space for it. Probably you can have roll and move as long as you can have some mitigation of bad rolls. It's still a possible mechanic. But the thing is, there are so many other things that you can do for a movement system Interestingly, Cluedo, which has roll and move as part of its makeup, apparently the original design of Cluedo didn't have dice for movement in it. You just chose where you wanted to go. I think you might have had you choose to go from one room to an adjacent room as the way of moving. And the publishers thought that really it's a board game. You have to have some dice in it, and you have to have roll and move. So it's really, they really missed. I think they really missed a trick with that, to actually put roll and move into a game. And the original design didn't have it. So that's quite an interesting thing.
Of course, the original Spiel des Jahres, I think. Yeah, the one about the hare and the tortoise, not the modern board game about the hare and the tortoise, but the one where you need to use triangular number of cards. Yes. So one carrot moves you 1, 3 carrots moves you 2, and so forth. Anyway, with this hare and tortoise, there was a random event to add a little bit of spice to it. And in the original version, they didn't have the dice basically as almost an artistic statement saying, hey, look, this game doesn't have any dice.
Yes. That's right. Yeah.
Whereas later on, they've reinstated that because actually having a die is a perfectly reasonable way to bring in some randomness occasionally.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got other ways of doing move. I think if you're going up to games like Yokohama and things like that, you can just move. And you might have a limited amount of movement that you can do, or penalties for moving through certain areas. It's a much better. The mechanisms we have nowadays for movement generally involve people making choices about where they want to move, rather than rolling a dice and seeing where you end up. So it's giving players agency now for movement, which is key, really. And that's a major change. Because I think players nowadays are much more willing to read more rules than they used to be. I mean, if you look, I look back at when I was young, Monopoly being the classic game that people now hate. But of course, people would never read the rules of Monopoly. If you've got a copy of Monopoly, see how long the rules are. They're quite short, and yet people would not read the rules or understand them. So people would rarely play Monopoly by the actual rules as written. Well, whereas I think nowadays there's more chance because people can look at videos of how to play. I think most play groups have got at least one individual who is prepared to sit down and read the rules. So you're more likely to be playing a game right than you were 30, 40 years ago.
I'm going to challenge, hopefully respectfully, what you're kind of implying there, which is that the general population's willingness to read rules has increased. I'm going to suggest that it's basically only within this small niche hobbyist space that, yes, that has increased. But, I was hearing someone talk about that they met some people who are playing Settlers, now known as Catan on the box. Settlers of Catan, obviously. But anyway, so these people were playing by all these wrong rules, apparently because it had been handed down to them through voice. Basically, people had taught them the games incorrectly, and then they had taught other people the game incorrectly. So now Settlers of Catan, or Catan, is at the point, apparently, where at least some people are just saying, yeah, we don't want to read the rules, but we're going to learn it from other people.
Yeah, I think there are two. Well, I think there are two broad type.
I will also say that even in Yogi, and I mean, how long are the rules for Yogi? Literally, they are this long, and that's Yogi Guru, but the ones for Yogi are slightly shorter. And I had someone tell me, oh, I was excited to hear you speak about the sadistic version. That sounds like I'll enjoy it even more. I said, oh, great. Do you have your own copy? Hadn't you read rules? And he said, oh, no. This other John Brieger taught me the rules, so we never bothered reading them. And I never knew that there were other ways to play. And that's the thing. If someone's taught you the rules, do you ever read the rules just to double check that you're doing it correctly? And I think that kind of tells you a lot about yourself as a gamer.
Yeah, I tend to. Actually, to be fair, I personally use it. I think there are two types of games. I think there's this is very, very broad. It's open to challenge. Fine, that's not a problem. I think there's the kind of game as commodity, which is a lot more mass market, large volumes of sales, which Catan has moved into. Well, it's moved into it several years ago. And those, so games that are aimed at a mass market, general public consumption, and then we've got our kind of hobby games, which are they're actually a different product type completely. In a way that so I would say you've got your commodity games, if you like, which would be things like Monopoly in the old days, and things like Catan now, and actually maybe even Yogi probably is more of a commodity type game, and where you're having to condense the play down to something which a member of the general public who isn't a quote gamer will be able to readily understand and play. And you've got to, that will attract more people and you'll get more mass sales. Whereas the market that we're in is surprise their games, and a lot of the people who are listening to this probably are more into the hobby games, where you've got an audience who are much more prepared to read lengthy rules and play long and complex games. And of course, the whole hobby games area is now extended into multiple various niches. So now you've got board war games, and you've got some people who only play one particular type of board game, won't play anything else. Some people will play they might play a social style of hobby game, which might be something like Azul, but they won't go to maybe games which are a couple of hours long. And there are other people who will quite happily play games which are 4 hours or more, and will probably not want to play what I would describe as those shorter, more social games. But all of our hobby games, from that kind of, there's a kind of, obviously the kind of grey area in the middle. And Spiel des Jahres is really aimed at that kind of converting to the mass market, the commodity type game where you can sell hundreds of thousands of copies. And then Kennerspiel is more into the hobby game area. Kennerspiel are more complex, and Kennerspiel is more into the hobby game area.
Alan Outson points out that backgammon, you know, incredibly old roll and move, is still a very relevant game.
I certainly wouldn't say that commodity games are not necessarily good games. They can be, obviously, yes, they definitely can be. And you know, vice versa. Some hobby games can be good or bad. Yeah, it's not a quality of game thing. And in a way, it's the ultimate challenge of a game designer, I suppose, is to get a game, as you have done, Bez, to move into that more commodity game market and have the sales that are associated with that.
I mean, fingers crossed. As I've expressed before, I've got lots of fear and worry, since, you know, as we become more aware of, okay, if I touch this card to my eyebrow, and I slot it into my eye glasses, does someone else want to do that? Which, for the sake of viral infection, might be quite a bad thing to do. But then, if you're within people that David Brain made a point that it's not actually the cards touching that's the real issue, it's the laughter, which is actually very true. And the Ludicrous did manage to steam dry it, which is great. The cards do survive that. But I wanted to get into the fact that, with all these games, there's quite often the notion of someone who sort of knows, who's a real hobbyist. We saw lots and lots of people making their own versions of Catan, and on some of these photos that I was flagging up, I noticed, okay, there's this big hobbyist market, and then there's, yes, it did very well, but clearly, I mean, there's kind of the alpha gamer, not in the sense of someone who takes control over the group, but someone who's a taste maker, someone who's going to get super enthusiastic and then potentially make their own 3D versions, make their own giant versions, go to the World Championships like that, and then that's going to filter down. And do you think that that is, is it partially by virtue of us coming together with the internet and everything, and that we've been able to filter down new games to?
Yeah, well, looking back over the years, there's been, I think there's probably been 3 interlinked things that have led to this great massive over 1,000 games per year, new games per year coming out. There's the pressure of, there's market pressure, which I think you couldn't underestimate that. Since Eurogame started, or since the 50s, I suppose, people have had more and more disposable income for things like this, which is basically a luxury product, isn't it, really? And so that automatically means, you might be able to tell that I've been reading Karl Marx, but because of that luxury market and the availability of cash that people have, that leads to an expansion of the market. And the interesting thing about the board game market is it's still expanding. Whereas people have been talking about the death of board games because of computer and video games for decades, and the market is still expanding. And that's because of the social interaction of board games. And I think it's noticeable, even with lockdown, there hasn't, as far as I can see, necessarily been a complete slackening off of board gaming because of online. We can do things online. I don't know. We don't none of us know yet how it will affect sales, but it's noticeable that Kickstarter has still doing, I think, quite well for selling. So there's pressure of market. There's more competition, but also we're in an expanding market because the international market's expanding. From Germany, our hobby game market, from Germany to France and the UK now, and the USA particularly, with an expanding market, we can have many, many, many more niches. So you might like one type of game, and I might like a completely different type of game and not play anything that you would normally play, but we're still both gamers. So we've got an expanding market.
Yes.
That's the thing, really. And of course, with things like Kickstarter and the internet, have made it a lot easier to enter the market. So people like me, I can enter the market at relatively low cost. When I started back in the 80s, the only way I could really feasibly get a game published was to go to an existing publisher and show my games and say, how about it? And so I got to persuade somebody else to publish my stuff. Obviously, that means it's got to be a good enough standard for them to publish. But with Kickstarter and the internet now, anyone can enter the market and develop their own games for a relatively low cost. And of course, the other thing is that larger companies can invest more in marketing, and they can they can produce much more product. So the major part of the evolution is a massive expansion of the market, and it means that you can create lots of niches. So there's the board wargaming, there's a niche of board wargamers who only play long board wargames, don't play anything else. And that couldn't have happened really even 30 years ago, because you wouldn't have been able to find enough players. Now you've got, with the internet, you can find players, you can play online if you can't play face to face.
And in the old days, by old days I mean 4 months ago, or maybe 5 months ago, it was things like meetup.com that were helping us so much, that facilitated Playtest UK. And it's, hi Elliot, it's lovely to have you. And Elliot makes a good point of middle class subcontinent India will be a huge for market development. And there was a Twitter group, I've not heard of this, Mumbai Gamers.
China will be a huge market. I mean, it is already.
The main obstacle there is always going to be about piracy, because as soon as your game is of any value, there is such a massive amount of piracy going on.
That doesn't mean to say there isn't a legitimate market as well. I mean, I believe there's Chinese version of Snowdonia Deluxe Master Set being produced at the moment. So I mean, that's I have no idea what potential sales of that would be. I haven't got a clue about what the size of the Chinese market might be. But that's indicative that it's definitely on the map. China definitely on the map for board games.
As you say, there are so many tools like Kickstarter and even Board Game Arena that talks about the Crazy Farmers and the Clutter Electrics having, I think this is the first time, having a Kickstarter game available on Board Game Arena at the same time, which is very interesting.
Well, yes, it's certainly something that we're considering if and when we kickstart again. I think there's probably quite a lot of merit in having an electronic version, having a digital version available for the Kickstarter. We didn't do that for Ming and March Progress, but that's largely because we were so pushed for time, and it was the Kickstarter was going on as lockdown was coming in, so it was all a bit of a crazy time at that point. But I think for our next Kickstarter, I would very much like to have a version available for playtesting, if nothing else, online, and I mean for playtesting by people who are Kickstarter backers, not just for playtesting the game to make it right. But to have
and when you say playtesting there, you don't mean playtesting as in the normal notion of playing it for the benefits of the game, to see how the game can be improved, but more playing it to test.
I think both. I think both. I think even in the Kickstarter campaign, if we have a more of a traditional, with Ming and March, we were in a situation where we'd effectively finished the design development. But you could easily have a Kickstarter, for example, if Gibson's Games are trying, but will probably kickstart the new Kingmaker. I envisage that during the Kickstarter we will be both showing backers the new game and how the new mechanics work, but also saying, what about options? You know, are there any particular options to that you might want to see? And we can readily create materials. I don't know whether Gibson's will be open to doing anything digital on this, but at least in theory, we could put options into the Tabletopia, for example, and test them out with people to see if they are to see if backers like that idea. So it's not just playing to test if people like the game, but it's also potentially playing to see if this particular option that maybe somebody suggested might actually work. So it's much more of a community enterprise in that case.
I think, Alan, we have gone already over by about quarter of an hour. And what that makes me realize is that the topic of how have games evolved is, of course, ridiculously big. And I'm sure we could talk about this literally for 2 or 3 days, let alone 2 hours. But before we go, because I shared the links, can you, in as short thing as possible, explain how these are relevant?
Right. Well, they're not necessarily relevant to how games evolve, but they're certainly fun things that I've been looking at. This first one, very briefly, it's a blog called A Collection of Unmitigated Pedantry. It's a historian, academic historian, who is looking at the history of battle in popular culture by analysing films, popular films like Lord of the Rings, and seeing what the reality might have been in medieval times, what reality actually was, and comparing how it's portrayed in films and books with what the reality was. So it's a way of being heavily critical in quite a humorous way of how filmmakers and authors have approached what they think medieval life was like. So very nice, how particular characters develop their strategy and how it isn't actually how you do it if you were trying to be successful. Classic thing, just one illustration of his approach. If you look at Game of Thrones, he's done several series on Game of Thrones stuff. in Game of Thrones, if you've seen the series, when they do a nice shot of one of the major locations, the cities in Game of Thrones, all you get is a walled castle or a walled city in the distance. And leading up to that walled city, there's just open field, open terrain, no farms, no roads, nothing, just as if it's wilderness. So here you've got a city, a walled city or a walled castle in the middle of a wilderness. So how are those people actually being fed? Where are they getting their food from? Because in reality, what you'd have to have is loads of farms, small villages, and even small towns around a large city. So the landscapes, they look nice in film, but they're completely impractical in reality. And I think that's a very interesting approach to how to analyze this. Next one. Sticking with medieval, I've been doing some work on the Kingmaker. I was looking at the roads, and I thought, can I find some sources for what the actual roads were like during the medieval period? And this is a great resource. This is called the Goth map. It's one of the earliest drawn maps of Britain. And King's College London have done an interactive version of this. So if you go to gothmap.org, you can actually zoom in and zoom out and wander around the map. And there's also a whole range of information on each of the locations on the map as well. So it's a wonderful thing just to wander around and have a peruse through, even if you're not doing serious research on it. That's that one. That's just a fun thing to have a look at. It's really interesting. And finally, the one I did, bending lines. This is one I found yesterday. A colleague of mine pointed it out. It's called Bending Lines. It's a website that is looking at maps and how they distort the terrain, how they distort thinking about the real land that they are purporting to map. So it's looking at the history of the use of maps as models. So how do you, to persuade people to move to a particular area, you can present on a map certain specific things and leave out others. So it's how maps can be used to achieve certain effects on your audience, because maps are just models of what you want to portray of reality. They're not, obviously, by definition, they're not going to give you the complete story. Classic example they had there was an early map of New England to encourage settlers to go to New England. They're portraying it as like England, and missing out critical things like the fact there are native Indians there, Native Americans there, excuse me, so missing out really critical things and stressing the ones that they want to stress is a key thing about maps. That's a useful little exhibition you can look at, and it's available digitally. It's one of those things which was going to be made available physically, and because of lockdown, they decided to do a virtual version.
And of course, arguably, this has made a lot of things more accessible to people who don't live in that physical location. And there is, I guess there's a whole question of how this is going to affect games in the future, and how games are evolving, and how games have evolved just within the past year, frankly. I mean, that's almost, but
the relevance of the maps is really to do with wargaming. When we're doing, if you're developing a war game, you're going to be you're probably using some form of map, but your map will be a specific distortion because it'll be how you want to portray that. I mean, I found that with Airfix Battles. Airfix Battles, because of the way we wanted the game to play out, we have relatively small boards, which are like 7 squares by 5 squares, and the ranges are very much shorter than you would actually have in reality, because we want that game mechanic we wanted it to be up close and personal right from the start of the game. So we distorted the distances, so that, for instance, tank ranges are only just a little bit more than machine gun ranges. That's completely ahistorical, but it makes the game work.
I think it almost feels like just looking at the history of wargaming or something like that might be a possible scope for next time we talk.
Sure.
A
Happy to
couple
do
of
that.
things.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Before we depart, I do quickly want to say thank you for everyone who's been watching, and Alan Oughton. Sure, I'm glad that you're on board with that. So thank you, Alan, Will Cook, Aquasulis, and Kevin Shaw, and Elliot Simmons. It's lovely to have you all along with us. I think that we've not really had any real conclusion other than games have evolved quite a bit and will continue to evolve. And there are, people have changed, tastes have changed, and we have discovered new mechanisms.
One thing we didn't even mention, Bez, was legacy games. The whole thing on legacy we mentioned. Yeah.
And so, yeah, looking forward to, I am today looking forward to seeing Chris, who's coming over to help me do a bit of admin and stuff, and we're going to be working on a few things together. Oh, I am going to be printing out a secret thing that I might talk about later. What I do, it's annoying because to some extent, okay, I have to be looking 1 or 2 years down the future as a sort of small-time publisher. Even as a small-time publisher, I still have to make sure that even just for the LDEC, there are 3 or 4 versions upcoming. I'm excited about the couple version, but still, I am trying to get the categorical version, and I don't want people to think, oh, Bez is just ignoring that. And I do want people to be excited about the categorical version, which I am really excited to make a reality and get out to people. But once that's out and then the little deck's out, then I want there to be the couple version, which is going to be a nice thing. And it's like, as part of me, I wish I had someone like Wizards telling me, okay, this is when you can start talking about these things. Because I understand Mark Rosewater's frustration, but for me, it's that frustration mixed with me having to be the person to make these decisions.
Well, yes, you're all wrapped into one. All the roles are wrapped into one with you, Bez, aren't they? That's the thing. Yes.
I'm looking forward to kind of, honestly, my looking forward to and my daily hope, ambition are kind of mixed together, which is just getting some work done, getting all the stickers sent out. Now I've done all the non-binary flag cats, which I will... Oh, I was going to show them up again, but I've lost them. But that is what I am looking forward to and what my ambitions are. What about you, Alan, and anyone in the comments who wants to tell us something they are looking forward to or hope to do?
Well, I mean, specifically today, I'm looking forward to getting together with Dave Mortimer and Rob Harper and poring over the feedback we got from Snails and Grails at Virtual GridCon, because we did a couple of runs of the game there, very successful runs actually, but there are definitely some improvements we want to have a look at and make. So that's quite exciting actually. So we've got some really good ideas to make that game work even better than it is now, and that's what I'm really looking forward to doing. So. And then of course, going back to Tabletopia, that'll be a lot of work again to get the next version on Tabletopia. But you kind of have to do it, don't you, really?
Yeah. And if you have enjoyed this, then again, thank you everyone who comments along. It's lovely to know you're here. And please follow me, do share it, do let your friends know about it. If you want to follow me, I am stuffbybez.com, twitter.com/stuffbybez, instagram.com/stuffbybez, twitch.tv/stuffbybez, facebook.com/thingsbybez, and I need to explore some new technologies, Alan, let me know about, or you can email me, stuffbybez@gmail.com. And Alan Paul is surprisestare.co.uk, Benfamfish or Surprisestare at Twitter. Oh,
Alan's at surprisestare.games.co.uk is the best way to get me.
There we go.
I'm not much for Twitter.
And the next stream, I am going to do a play along tonight at just after 8 p.m. UK time. We're going to start at 8:10 although we might start drifting back towards 8 p.m. as the weeks go on, now that clapping a what's hard thing. Tomorrow is going to be, I believe, my 60-second stream, and that seems like a lot. So I'm again going to have a stream where I'm just going to talk about streaming, and I'm going to reevaluate what I'm doing, talking a bit about what I'm planning for the future, because as you'll notice, I've done a lot more interviews. I think of the last 11 days, maybe 4 of them have been me just on my own. The other 7 were all with a variety of people from around the world, which is lovely. We've spoken to people from, just in the past week, if I look at my calendar, I've spoken to people from, of course, the UK, from Australia, from Scotland, from Malaysia, and a couple of others from UK. And so exploring what I'm likely to do in the future and moving forwards. Thursday is going to be a bit of a review. Friday, we're having Spiral Galaxy on to talk about distribution, which I'm excited about. And Saturday, I'm having Presh from Nigeria to talk about how you demo board games in Nigeria, which is going to be a really interesting discussion. And so thank you, everyone who continues to pop in. And I'm glad that you've enjoyed them, Alan. Thank you for being
Thanks,
a
Alan.
And thank you, Alan Paul. And
my pleasure. See you again soon, hopefully.
Yes, all that is left to do is to sing bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is the goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye.